ARB session will start in just a few moments. Thank you.
Regular meeting for agenda July 7th, 2022. May I read? Pursuant to AB 361, this meeting will be held with the option to attend by teleconference or in person. Members of the public may provide live public comment by submitting a speaker card prior to the start of public comment on that item. Speakers may address items that are not on the agenda during the oral communications portion of the meeting. Spoken comments via the computer or a smartphone will be accepted through the Zoom app. To address the board, go to zoom.us-join. Meeting ID is 365-6189-1491. When you wish to speak, click on raised hand. To offer comments, use the regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 965-6189-1491. When you wish to speak on the agenda item, hit 9 on your phone so we know that you wish to speak. Thank you.
And I will conduct the roll call. Chair Hirsch.
Here.
Vice Chair Baltai. Your mic is muted, Vice Chair.
Present.
Thank you. Board Member Thompson will join later. Board Member Chan.
Present.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Medina, I'm getting a very,
muted, Vice Chair.
Medina, excuse me, I'm hearing a very strange echo
Thank you.
coming
Board
out over
Member
the system.
Thompson will join later. Board Member Chan.
Present.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Medina, I'm getting a very,
Do you have the internet on or?
Yeah, it sounds like he's getting a delay echo of whatever is being recorded, but I wouldn't have an idea as to why.
Okay, I still see Board Member Baltai on the list.
Maybe Board Member Baltai, you have this problem because you're logged in two devices, like a tablet, iPad or phone and the laptop. So you just need to log off from other devices and just use one device. devices, like a tablet, iPad, or phone, and the laptop.
I'll check
So
and
you just need to log off from other devices and just use one device.
I believe I am. Perhaps it's better now.
Devices, like a tablet, iPad, or phone, and the laptop.
I'll check
So
and
you just need to log off from other devices and just use one device.
But it's not your problem.
It's not my problem.
Yeah, I think,
I can't hear you. Can't hear you. Your mic isn't on.
Hi, I'm back.
Yes. Can you hear me better now with no echo?
But all better now. Thank you.
All right, we're
Okay.
on track now.
So Jody, are there any agenda changes, additions, deletions?
Yes, so we've done roll call. We have Board Member Thompson will join us later. We need to do oral communications first.
Yes, please.
So do we have
Are there
any?
any public comments?
If you have any
Adina?
public comments, please raise hand on Zoom and Zoom app. But I only see one participant. Another one is just our panelist. No raised hands at the moment, and I haven't received any speaker cards.
Okay, thank you. Agenda changes and additions and deletions?
Yes, thank you. I believe we have one minor change just at the ad hoc committee for Bayshore Road. That Chair Hirsch, you were going to be part of that committee instead of Vice Chair Balte, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's the only change. Thank you.
Any city official reports?
Yes, thank you. My name is Jody Gerhardt. I'm the manager of current planning. And you see on your screen here, we do have a list of our regular hearings. And if we go to the next page, we're showing what the future items are going to be. So for July 21st, we're expecting to hear the Home Key project, which is an emergency shelter project for 88 units. We're also expecting to hear about the permanent parklet program. So those will be the two main items for next time. Something new that I've done that the board had requested was to put in a list of brand new projects. So these are projects that have recently come in that staff is working on. And you'll see there's a second page as well to this. And so if board members are interested in, sort of doing some early research, they could certainly do that. We just need to be careful that, you're doing your own research and not sharing with fellow board members because we do need to save the deliberation for the public hearings. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Jody, for preparing this list. It's really very important for us as we move forward into this idea that we're going to talk about later on today. So I think we're up to our first action item, which is 180 El Camino Road, a building EE modification, first formal public hearing, judicial 180 El Camino Real, recommendation on the applicant's request for approval of a board level architectural review of application to allow the demolition of existing building J, formerly La Belle de Spa, and modification to the previously approved building EE, including standalone building with a new store facades for 2 future restaurant tenants. Environmental assessment exempt from the CEQA per section 15302, replacement or reconstruction. Zoning district CC, community commercial. For more information, Tamara Harrison at mbakerintel.com. So for introduction, we'll have a presentation of staff. Tamara, are you there?
Yes, and if we wanted to do disclosures before that time, if we have any disclosures?
Yes, thank you. Do we have any disclosures?
Yes, I visited the site yesterday.
I disclosed that I visited the site yesterday.
I visited the site as well.
And I too. And Ozma, we'll just assume, has also. So Tamara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. Tamara Harrison, Michael Baker International, presenting as contract planner for city staff. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, this action item, as mentioned, is for the building EE modification at the Stanford Shopping Center. The project is located at 180 El Camino Real. It's in the northwestern portion of the center. And again, building EE will be a newly proposed building. Currently, there's a building J in the location, which is the LaBelle Day Spa, which is proposed to be demolished. The site is within the Stanford Shopping Center, is subject to the master tenant facade and sign program. The sign program identifies those areas of the center that require a city review with the green line shown in this illustration. And those storefronts that exceed 35 feet in length require ARB public hearing. And those that are 35 feet or less require staff level review. So given the location of this project and the proposed length of the storefronts, we are here at the ARB hearing today. The project, again, is located within the northwestern portion of the center and faces Shopping Center Way, as well as El Camino Real, and seeks to demolish the existing building J located in that area and to propose a new freestanding building EE that will accommodate to future restaurant tenants. The project has also been conditioned to provide 4 bicycle racks for the center. The project does not propose to increase the floor area ratio. There's actually an overall net reduction through this proposal for the floor area ratio. Does not propose to increase height from what was previously approved in the building EE design, or does it propose to change the use of the tenant space? It will remain retail, restaurant, and it does not seek to change the vehicular circulation of the site from what was previously approved. The building will include a number of design components, including brick and stone, fluted concrete, high pressure laminate woods, stucco, metal accents, and a green wall. Some of these design components were previously approved for building EE under that Macy's Men's redevelopment project. And the site design and building design have been determined to be consistent with the sign program and the shopping center's character. This illustration here essentially shows the previously permitted conditions under that Macy's Men's redevelopment project that originally approved building EE. It was previously approved as a 6,749 square foot building with 2 outdoor dining areas, and it was attached to building J. So you can kind of see in this illustration here, shaded area here is the building EE that was approved under that previous project, and it was attached to building J labeled here. Under this proposal, building EE is proposed as an 11,799 square foot building with 2 outdoor dining areas. Again, it will be proposed as a freestanding building. And there is a pedestrian paseo that is proposed between the new building EE and the existing building C that will be located in this area here. As far as colors and materials are concerned, for restaurant A, which is located more so in the southern portion of the building, it will consist of fluted concrete, high-pressure laminate wood, and a light oak, as well as metal accents. Future tenants of the restaurants will come back and be able to propose their storefront systems at a later date when those tenants are decided upon. For restaurant B, the primary materials will consist of a brown stone, a brown brick, as well as a dark walnut high-pressure laminate wood as well. This illustration here shows the elevation of the building that will be facing the roadway and restoration hardware. And that elevation will consist of fluted concrete, a brown brick, brown stone, and will also include a green wall that's located at a common area trash room that each tenant will share. In addition, since building EE is now being proposed as a freestanding building, the existing building C will have a portion of its elevation exposed that was not previously exposed. So that elevation is proposed to be treated with a cement fiber board, as well as a brown stucco finish and dark bronze metal accents. This illustration is to give you an idea of the elements that will be included in the pedestrian paseo. So looking at this illustration, building EE would be located at the top of the illustration. Here's the paseo here, and then existing building C would be located on the other side of the paseo. The paseo is proposed to include market string lighting, as well as ground mounted lighting and trellises with vines as well. As far as key considerations for the project was determined to be consistent with the ARB findings, the master tenant facade program, as well as the El Camino Real design guidelines and the Palo Alto Municipal Code, which I don't have listed here. Staff recommends that the ARB provide direction to staff as to whether or not the proposed future tenant storefront systems should come back for review at staff level or ARB ad hoc committee. And staff also recommends that the ARB recommend approval of the proposed project to the Director of Planning and Development Services based on findings and subjects to staff's conditions of approval. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
I'm the only one for the moment here.
Yes, Board Member Chen stepped away for a moment. She'll be back soon, I'm sure. And we have the applicant, if they'd like to give a presentation.
David, why don't we do the applicant presentation, then we can do questions.
Sounds good.
Are we good? Okay. Well, speaking, this is interesting, virtually and in person. My name is Wayne Chubb. I'm a senior design manager assigned to the property. I'm the local in-house architect. I'm joined here with some familiar faces, Matt Woods with GHA Design and Mike Mowry with Kinley Horn Civil Engineering and Landscape. I'm going to keep my comments short since I've been with Simon since January and there's a lot of history with the project, but I'm here for questions and we'll go through things. We're really excited about the project and the evolution that we're bringing in front of you guys.
Hello, I'm Matt Woods from GHA Design. We've been on this project for multiple iterations in the quest to kind of build this new village atmosphere at this end of the project. Working in collaboration with Nelson Worldwide Architects. Are we on? That's good. Now, Tamara just went through exactly our presentation, so I'll cut this a little shorter and sweeter. The idea of This project being pre-approved before is great. We had 2 smaller restaurants, fast casuals, connected to Building J. Again, with our push to kind of really push towards a more village atmosphere here, more pedestrian friendly places, to walk through with bicycles and strollers and dogs, etc. During COVID, what came up is the opportunity for Building J to be available. It also created an opportunity for us to kind of reimagine that end of the property. So in doing so, the biggest bonus for us is losing 2 ideas for 2 small fast casual restaurants, and really bringing these 2 spaces, I think roughly around 7,500 square feet and 3,500 square feet, for 2 more substantial restaurants. More substantial restaurants will have a 360-degree view, so you'll be able to visualize these things all around. Much larger patios and spaces to kind of like soften all the corners and all the edges. What's important to note here is that we're not really, or actually we're not at all, touching the curb lines. It's as it was before. Our building footprint as far as how we reach towards Wilkes-Bashford and towards Restoration Hardware sits in the same format. But we have this, this new introduction now of this Paseo space, which is really great for us. It's 20-foot wide. It's green. We introduced these interesting sort of like trellis follies in there. So it's just a nice bonus for us and great access. And it really helps us get to the other area for parking, which, at one time people used to cross through that. I guess you'd call that a Paseo as well, as what used to be the Ralph Lauren Polo store. So I think people are looking for another access point. Hierarchy of materials through here and all of elevations. We have stone, we have the fluted concrete, which is more of like a rain screen. We have live green wall introduced into this space that faces towards Restoration Hardware. That's at one of our access points for garbage and service. On the back side, you can see these sort of golf tee shapes back there. Those are the follies that are being introduced as sort of trellis elements. They hold planting, they'll hold lighting. And then we'll have a little bit of like Tivoli lighting that kind of bounces from place to place to kind of help make that space a little bit more vibrant. So walking around it, you can see off to the left-hand side here, that's really sort of our great visual towards the Paseo. Again, 20 feet wide, 8+ width in just concrete, or sort of say hard surfaces, green to the sides. It meanders a little bit. We took the initial planter that was closer to the road here, split that so it has better access as well. It kind of takes that wall out of it. We still have to have that, for vehicular reasons. It's important to us. You can see though, as we start to go around these buildings, each one of them with this 360-degree view, we've used landlord materials to kind of define the architecture of the shape. And the intention is to use tenant materials, which would be the glazing and whatnot, kind of soften all of our edges. So everything kind of tears and drops and layers in there, then makes its way down to the landscape, and to kind of keep it quite pleasant. This is the side facing, we're going down 360 degrees, by the way, around this counterclockwise. This is the side facing back towards Restoration Hardware. You see at midpoint is roughly where our green wall is. And again, that tiers again into the planting, which is roughly in the same spot that was previously approved. And on the other side, again, the materials change a little bit, and this is more conducive towards, directly towards a specific tenant. But the intention of these larger trellis areas, that as they drop and they tier everything, is that also within that, our tenants, once they get through the process, they have an opportunity to kind of energize the space one step further. They could bring in umbrellas, they could bring in canopies, they could bring in, extra lighting, fireplaces. We're working on the railings and adding more texture and elements to that too, such as other planters and loose elements. And as we roll the corner, this is the other view back out, leaving the mall concourse now and into towards the Paseo and out to the other direction. So I saw you guys looking for material board. This was sent, so we'll make sure that it's in your hand. You do have it? Okay.
And wasn't brought in.
So it's a repeat of materials from the past, with the stones and real brick and the wood compounds. This fluted material, which is a cementitious concrete, which would be applied in sheet form, that's newer. And the introduction of some, sort of like tenant type materials is the ones that are like the cobalt tiles and things that kind of break it down a little bit. And then the tenant goes through there and does their version. So that's where we're at.
Okay, if you could stay for a moment,
Yeah, no problem.
and we'll
Yeah.
see If staff has any questions. Mr. Chen, Commissioner.
Hi, thank you for your application. I have a few questions to the applicants. The first thing is about for the parapet wall height. So I think there is a typo on sheet A-E4, the project south elevation, the lower one. It says for the top of the brick wall, is it 128 or 125? Sheet A-EE4, the south elevation. On the right side, there are elevation heights and there are, the top one is at 128 and the second one from the top is also 128.
128.
120 right here. These two. So essentially, that should be the height of the screen or the top.
Yeah, that's a typo. The 120 is top of parapet.
Yes, on the upper drawing, it shows 125 for the lower one.
On the same one.
Are you asking about the height of the building? Because it looks like there's two different parapet heights. So one is
Okay, yeah, right.
at
So I just-
128 and the other's at 129.
And I want to make sure that the brick wall will be lower, a few inches lower than the concrete wall, than the fluted concrete wall on the right.
Yeah, just a bit. Yeah.
Okay, okay,
But ultimately, the 129 is actually the screening wall behind. That's our max.
okay, okay. And I noticed for the tenant restaurant A, the storefront opening, you set it to be two different height. One is 14 feet 6 inches and the other is 15 feet high. So I want to know, is there a reason behind that to have the opening height different? When you see the elevation, the north
No,
elevation?
It's just how it worked out with the trellis. Just so they're not like a perfect line across, trying to break it up a little bit.
Okay, so,
Am I reading the right thing?
Time with the 15 foot and the time with the 14.6 here.
Oh, okay. We'll go for
14.
14, 6, and 15.
See, that's 15, and then
No, I think it's all in the same tenant. The 14, 6
Oh, yeah.
and the jump. No, there's not a real rationale towards that. Just that's where the trellis lines.
okay,
there's a metal band below the brick in this zone. Whereas
okay.
bring it down to the 14.6.
Oh, sorry. There's a small canopy on the one side that
Uh-huh,
has structure behind it. The other side is a trellis that's attached.
okay.
If they had to align, we can definitely do that.
Okay, and for all the materials, I noticed some of them labeled as tenant to be determined and some of them are clearly labeled. So I want to know the difference between those two, like are the ones that clearly labeled will be the permanent material stay there, and then the tenant to be determined the material will be changed later depending on what the future tenant be.
Yeah, on the elevations, everything that is detailed and hatched
Uh-huh,
is by landlord. The spaces with the X through them is
uh-huh,
all by tenant. So they'll come through and they'll fill that portion in. Some is glass, sometimes they'll have another layer of material or whatever's part of their brand.
uh-huh.
Is that answering the question?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So on sheet A-EE1, the floor plan, the ground level floor plan, for restaurant tenant B, you show the canopy above, like the 3 feet overhang, and on the right, on the left hand, on the left side, the tenant A, you show it will be per the tenant design. Is there a reason why for that? Over the entrance?
No, on that side, it's kind of been transition where there is a tenant. I can't speak to the tenant being looked at, so. Yeah, on this side is dashed in heavy, on the other side it's not.
I think what we're showing is the maximum tenant zone. So that's what we're bringing in front of you and to get approval.
Okay. And one more question about the vertical wood thing over the restaurant A. What's the supporting system behind the vertical thing?
So that's a screen wall. That's actually going directly over the material behind it.
Okay.
So it's an open scrim.
Okay. All right. That's my question for now. Thank
Okay.
you.
And with that, the intention is that that's part of our design now, but when it's a tenant, that part might be re-looked at, but probably go through with them and their approvals.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Are there any other board member questions?
Yes, I have a few questions, if that's all right. Some of them will hopefully be a little bit redundant. Just for clarification, the new Paseo is 20 feet wide, is that correct?
Correct.
And then the paved portion of it is 8 feet?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So that's about 6 feet of planting to either side?
Correct. Yes. And it's kind of offset. It kind of like goes back and forth down that aisle. But yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Do you guys have any sort of minimum requirements for lighting down there? I mean, I see that you're showing some really beautiful string lighting and some wall sort of sconce lighting. Are you trying to hit a minimum number of lumens or anything like that to make sure that that's an inviting space in nighttime?
Yeah, we're trying to hit like the mall minimum. I don't know the actual number myself.
Fine. Yeah.
But also add accent on top of that. And there's also opportunities for the restaurants to kind of bring their sconce lighting and whatnot around the corners.
Perfect. Yeah, just with a slightly narrower space of that Paseo versus some of the other pathways that are seen in Stanford Shopping Center. I would just encourage, make sure it's almost a little bit brighter than maybe you would expect it to be, just to make sure that feels like a safe passage at nighttime.
Agreed.
And yeah, just my 2 cents on that. The final question I have is, so it was very helpful for you to clarify that the exit portions on the elevations are for future tenant proposals. As I was noticing the renderings versus the elevations, some of the renderings show a bit more detailing of the windows. For example, on AEE8 with the tapas bar, there seems to be more grid lines, things like that. So if I'm understanding correctly, that's going to be left up to the tenant, correct?
Correct. And the tenants will also see these rendered views. The intention is to always kind of push them in a positive direction to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
So the landlord, handling, I guess, the heft of this in the design with the layers of texture and the layers of different materials. There's not a lot left over for them to have to fill in. So,
Sure.
We're trying to raise the bar, bring in nano systems, nano walls, open up the facades and just do more with it.
Excellent. I believe that is all my questions for the time being. If I think of anything else, I will circle back. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Hirsch, I have some questions as well, please.
Proceed.
To the tenant or to the applicant or staff, I'm not sure. I'm looking for more clarity still. My colleagues have asked the same set of questions regarding the changes that are potentially made by the tenants. Almost every application we see for the shopping center has tenants doing pretty substantial changes to the building, new storefronts, new glazing systems. I want to understand, you're saying that on this application, on the elevations, only the Xed-in, basically the window areas would be changed by the tenants. So these trellises, the wood slatted finish, that kind of stuff, is it certain that will not get changed, or are we looking at more applications for that? Staff, are we expecting to see 2 new applications for the storefronts when the tenants come into these 2 restaurants?
So we're expecting to see window changes at this point. which could be done at the staff level or could be done at an ARB ad hoc meeting. And so we'd appreciate the ARB's comments on that.
How about though, to the applicant, things like the trellis design? Is that not going to change?
As far as not changing, I mean, our intention, as Mr. Wood said, is to drive the tenants to maintain everything that we have in front of you. If a tenant were to want to affect a finish prior, as part of their design, we would ask them to include that in their application. But our intention is that it is only the exterior that they resubmit for their future.
But it is possible that a tenant could say they want a different design for the trellis, for example, on the exterior. And they would be permitted to do that, would they not?
They only if it comes through as part of their approval.
And staff, if they wanted to redesign the trellis again, for example, that's something that we would certainly allow. It would just require ARB review, I imagine, no?
Yes, agreed.
There would be a planning entitlement that would be required. Whether it's at staff level or ad hoc level would be the question.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I wonder if the applicant could explain to me your plans regarding the mature trees on both sides of the existing building right now. It was tough when I was out there in person trying to figure out what's going on, but I believe, please check tell me if I'm wrong, that some of the trees on either ends of the new alley are to be removed. Could you explain to me what trees you're taking out, please?
Sorry, Commissioner Bartlett, just 1 second. Let us get to the right plan sheet. Yeah.
I think your tree disposition plan, sheet T3, seems to indicate red X's through quite a few trees on either side of the alley.
So thank you, Commissioner Bartlett. So correct, we do have a few tree locations that would need to be removed. Specifically, the trees on the west side of the paseo is to allow for that paseo opening. Today, those are in the former La Bella Day Spa courtyard area, and so those would need to be removed to allow that paseo access. On the eastern side of the paseo, those tree removals were approved as part of the previous, one of the previous approvals from the ARB committee for the RH and Wolf Bashford approvals.
Is it necessary to remove especially tree 282 on the west side and 260 and 261 on the east? Those are all pretty mature trees. Is it something you guys consciously want to take out as part of the design?
So thank you for your question, Board Member Bartlett. 260 and 261 were previously approved for removal. They will allow for the new crosswalk enhancements and access to the paseo. Those were in the approvals before for the smaller EE restaurant footprint. Tree 282 on the west side that you noted, I believe we're removing for new utility connections for the restaurant, and that is the reason for that removal.
Okay, thank you very much for that. To the staff, can we confirm that there's sufficient sidewalk space on either side of the outdoor dining areas? That's been a common issue at the shopping center. It looks awfully tight at the front of building restaurant B. Have we checked that?
I would need to ask Tamara or the applicant if we have a circulation plan for this one. But I agree. Go ahead.
I was going to say my apologies. I couldn't get off mute fast enough. The site plan does show that there's the 8-foot free and clear walkways in those areas, and I'm trying to zoom into that area at the moment. So it's showing between The outdoor dining space and the sidewalk, excuse me, and the curb, there's 10 feet there.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to be sure we've settled on a sort of an 8-foot space. I want to be sure we're being consistent to maintain that. My last question, if you'll indulge me, Chair Hirsch, is to have the applicant show us where the bicycle parking is going to be proposed. Please. Yeah, you're smiling, Kendra. But where are the bicycles to be parked, especially the large trailer bicycles? That
I knew as soon as they mentioned the bicycle parking, I was like, we're going to want to see where that is.
So show us, please, on the site plan, or somehow explain where that parking is proposed for.
Hold on, I'll share.
We're just sharing a screen.
It is. We're just going to share the screen again so that we can.
Beautiful, yeah.
Here.
So if you see the cursor, it's locating in the one location and the other is to the far right.
On that location on the far right you just circled, is that not making the sidewalk width less than 8 feet? Am I missing something there? Are you sure you want to put the bike parking right there? But okay, that's a subjective question there, but that's okay. Thanks for explaining where they are. That's all my questions, Chair Hirsch.
Okay, I guess that anything else for final? You want to?
Actually, I have one more question about the green wall light. So I saw you specify the lighting fixture over the green wall. Is it a grow light for the living wall or it? No.
I don't believe that's a grow light. No, it's a live wall, so it's just using natural elements.
Okay. And since the wall is facing north, do you have any thoughts on the plant choice at this moment?
No, not yet.
Okay.
All right, well, it's back to me. I'll ask a couple of questions as well. I also had questions about not seeing the bike rack on G 1.0, so that's been answered. Some other details that I'm curious about. One of them is you show specific kinds of lighting fixtures hanging in the outdoor areas. Are those also to be tenant selected, and you've just chosen some fixtures with?
Are those the ones that are in the
character just
renderings?
to show that there'd be a different character to each restaurant? What is the plan
Sorry,
for that?
Chair Hirsch, are you referring to the lighting fixtures within the tenant outdoor areas or the site lighting fixtures?
Okay, I noticed the paving in the passageway, not the paseo, but the main passage that connects back to the shopping center. And the paving is kind of interrupted there as it meets the adjacent building. Is there a reason for stopping the paving at that point, or as you're showing it?
Are you referring to the rendering or is this on a plan?
G 1.0.
G 1.0.
So on your site plan, if you can just explain the different pavements. And then also, Chair Hirsch, you were asking about lighting. Is that just for the outdoor dining areas or for other lighting that you were asking about?
Yeah, just outdoor dining.
Okay.
Yeah, the outdoor dining would be by tenant. So that we're showing what the vision is, the landlord's vision of what this could be within those spaces.
Okay. Paving question?
Yeah, we're just pulling up that sheet.
So, sorry, Chair Hirsch, to clarify your question, you're discussing the, where in the site plan sheet G1, the paving is kind of a light gray and ends approximate where the blue bottle tenant is. Is that your question, sir?
Well, I see it on the west side of the, in the building noted as V.
Yeah. So Commissioner Chair Hirsch, excuse me, This image is really just reflecting the limits of the new paving at that location where you're referring to, I think near the three trees that are shown in the site plan.
Yes.
We would match, it would conform to the paving that continues south of there through that corridor.
So what you're showing for the existing paving is the same as what you're putting down in module and in material?
Yes, Chair Hirsch, the proposed paving will be similar in concrete materials as the current corridors and sidewalks throughout the shopping center.
Okay. You noted that the area of the vehicular connection that we previously approved is exactly the same. Are those planters a repeat of what you showed before, what was shown before?
Thank you, Chair Hirsch. Yes, those planter locations are the same. The planters themselves are slightly larger than the previous approval. The reason for that is those planters also do serve a stormwater treatment facility. And because the building itself, the EE restaurants is larger than the previous approval, more stormwater treatment was required. But the location is the same. Their size has gotten slightly larger.
Okay. I recall that we were very concerned about the elevation of that crossover area there. I think it was discussed that there would be an on-level drop-off area there or something of that sort in the previous approvals. What's happened with all of that, the elevation of that crossover vehicular area?
Yeah. Okay. So let me share my screen, Chair Hirsch, so that the Zoom link can also see it.
Mhm.
So I'm showing sheet AEE8, and this is looking to the west along that new elevated connector between the proposed EE building and the restoration hardware. The restoration hardware would be to the right, just outside this image. The drop-off area that you're noting would be where my cursor is moving on the screen. 1 second. Would be here in this area along the screen. That is at the same elevation as the sidewalk. Those planters, as we noted, provide a separation between the pedestrian walkway and the vehicular travel way. And then within the pickup area, there would be additional bollard applications to protect drivers and vehicle conflicts.
Okay. Is that coordinated with restoration hardware on the opposite side, the sidewalk elevation and curb issues?
Yes, Chair Hirsch, all of what you're seeing in that layout is as approved through the ARB's approval of the package in, I think, late 2019. All those curb lines are the same and continue to be coordinated with the RH construction activity on the north side of that driveway or drive aisle.
Okay. On materials, as in previous discussion, there's a strong blue item that's a metal surface that's used around one of the buildings. Is that open to possible changes as well as the other areas that are marked in?
Yes, that possibly could change. Its intention right now is actually directed.
I'm sorry, can you wait? Yeah.
That possibly could change. The intention right now is it's actually directed towards a specific targeted tenant. So we use these drawings as well as sort of a pre-lease to try and entice somebody to be part of this and envision how they could fit into that space. But that intentionally is towards them. It possibly could change, yes.
Okay.
It might
On a
just be a
very
color change.
general sense here, what you have done in terms of material, and that will be maintained when you show these to tenants, that they would not have the option to make any major changes in the volumes of the building as you have described them.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Simple answer. Thank you. Well, I think that's really all the questions I have. So let's bring it back to,
Hey, excuse me, Chair Hirsch, one last question, if I might.
go ahead.
I'm looking at the site plan on sheet G 1.0, and I had circled, I noticed a transformer proposed across Stanford Shopping Center Way in the small parking area in front of the Wilkes-Bashford proposed building. Is that new transformer part of this project, or was that previously approved at that location? Part A. Part B, is that transformer taking up existing parking spaces or proposed parking spaces?
Thank you for your question, Board Member Bartlett. So that is a new transformer location. It is the reason, and I'll circle it on the screen, that it is colored in this site plan. The intent of the site plan is that all the colored elements are the new elements to this EE renewed application. It is removing one parking space from the previous application.
Okay, and then to the staff, have we reevaluated whether that parking still works? It was very tight last time, and losing a parking space then is an issue.
Tamara may have the exact numbers, but I believe we're still about 50 spaces over what's required.
If I may, through the chair, the sheet P1 has the parking information for the renewed application, and does reinforce what Jody just noted, which I believe is an excess of, I think it's 52 spaces, sir. Yeah, and generally, I think a good point of clarification that I don't believe has been mentioned today is that if you if you add the square footage of the previous EE building application and the demolition of building J, there's an overall net loss of square footage in this part of the shopping center.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Just for clarification in the minutes, Board Member Chen returned a while ago, back when the applicant was first presenting their project, and Board Member Thompson has just joined us, but will not be voting on this particular item. Thank you.
Unless there are other questions, I think we could end this phase of the questioning and bring it back to the board for discussion. Who would like to start?
I will start, David, if that's okay.
Yes.
Thank you for your exciting proposal. I'm super delighted to see the new passageway, the alley proposed between your building and the existing shopping center. I think it's a wonderful idea. And it does replicate what used to be through the Ralph Lauren store, which was very popular. In fact, I had to dodge through the neighboring store just to get back there the other day. And I think the way you've done the drop off between Restoration Hardware is also really exciting. So I think on a big level, the site planning is working well. I also like the outdoor dining areas on either ends of the building. I think that adds a lot of vitality and life to the building and the facade, which is all really good. I have some concerns regarding what I call smaller scale site planning issues. So I'll just list them off. The transformer location I just asked about seems to me a very poor location. It's a very prominent visual spot, and it seems to block access coming out of that parking lot perhaps. And does it really need to be there? I'm wondering if it's not someplace else that could be located. That's one question mark. Could you think about that? I'm really distressed by your proposed bicycle parking locations. The parking spot on the on the right, on the east side, is directly at the entrance to the alley. It seems to completely block the sidewalk and just be a very ungainly place to put bicycle parking. Surely there's someplace more convenient without being such a public nuisance you could come up with. Same exact thing on the left-hand side, that these internal passageways at the shopping center have tremendous vehicular pedestrian traffic. And putting the bike parking right in the middle like that just seems awkward and honestly just not thought through. So I'd like to see you put some more effort into thinking about the bicycle parking locations for that. And then the entrance for the trash storage, I think, is just poorly situated. It seems to me to be a very prominent part of the facade of the elevation off the drop off, and to have that trash store there, that just inevitably means you have this big greasy streak on the sidewalk in front of it, and dropping somebody off next to some guy bringing the trash from the restaurant in or out is never sightly or attractive. And again, there must be another place you could figure out where to put that. Maybe that goes off the alley or something. But at that level, I think your site planning isn't quite pulling together with the same level of quality that I see otherwise. So I'd like to see if you couldn't rethink some of those things. Again, so it's the transformer location, the bike rack location, and the service entrance to the building on the side there. I'm concerned about the finishes on the existing building exposed now for the alley. What I see on your elevation seems to be a hodgepodge, and I'd like to see a more consistent and appropriate architectural treatment of that entire facade. I think it's not going to look very good what you have now. I don't see that the landscaping is really going to conceal it that well. The exposed portion by the La Belle Day Salon has this sort of tilt-up concrete look to it, and at the least, I would think you'd want to continue something consistent with that or redo the whole thing. But I'm not convinced that what your elevation showing is really going to work that well. I just don't think it'll be that attractive. So I'd like to see more detail on that and more refinement to that part of the design. I remain concerned that outdoor dining locations do not impinge on the pedestrian flow around the shopping center. So as I called out, and Tamara reassured me that there's 10 feet of clearance, that's fine. But for example, on the restaurant B, the one facing the shopping center way on the right side of the drawing, that corner there just cuts into the ability of people to flow around these buildings. And there's tremendous pedestrian traffic on a Saturday afternoon around here. You just want to be sure just by chamfering that corner, you can make a difference for somebody in a wheelchair trying to get around without being pushed off the curb, that kind of thing. So not a huge accommodation, not really cutting back on your useful space, but just maybe not be rectilinear or something to make it more appropriate. Lastly, I'd just like to point out for the public record, once again, that the shopping center is underparked, especially this northeast corner of the shopping center. We've now added or proposing to add 2 buildings, removing a tremendous amount of parking. The rationale goes that there's a large parking structure on the other side of the shopping center, which meets the stated required parking requirements, but that's not realistic that people will park there and walk all the way over here, especially for a function such as a restaurant. There's not sufficient parking in the lots adjacent to and immediately around this, and we've only exasperated the situation with these 2 new buildings. Restaurants are an increasing attraction. I will point out to my colleagues, to the staff, to anyone who's listening, a new restaurant downtown with takeout is required to have 1 parking space per 33 square feet of restaurant. A new restaurant in the shopping center is required to have 1 parking space per 275 square feet. That's an inequity that inherently benefits the shopping center and disadvantages local merchants and restaurateurs in town, and that's just not right. So I put that on the record again. I feel strong about it, but it is not an architecture board issue, so I don't think it affects this application. But we should all be aware of those numbers. 1 for 275 versus 1 for 33, and the shopping center is barging full steam ahead in this corner with all this attractive stuff without sufficient parking. So thank you very much for acknowledging me.
Okay. Thank you again for your application. I think the site plan is very successful site plan. I like the design of the patio. I think it's inviting and it will be a very interesting walkway. And yeah, I would suggest you to double check on the surrounding of the buildings and make sure that the 8 foot wide clearance, the circulation would work. And for the floor plan, I think I'm a little bit concerned about the floor plan, although there is not much showing what the interior would be like. But generally speaking, for restaurant, we know the kitchen and prep area will take like up to 40% of the space. But when we see the restaurant tenant B, it seems like there are 3-sided or pretty wide opening space. So I wanted to make sure that there is enough back house area left for this tenant, or maybe the partition wall need to be reconsidered where to put the partition wall. Well, it also depends on the type of the restaurants. So some of them might just require the smaller prep area. So that is something I just want to point out and see if it will work well later. And for the elevations, I think it is a very nice detailed elevations. I like the materials you put together. I like the green wall that break up the 2 restaurants, and also it makes it, the green wall is lower and break up the massing. I do like the north elevations, and on the south elevation, I'm not sure about whether you want to do the same thing like for the in the middle, like the wood panel thing. Do you want to lower it as well as what you did for the green wall so that it will not be a continuous step down thing? And as far as the existing trees, I agree with what my colleague just brought up. I think that I would suggest you to reconsider whether all the trees need to be removed, especially the number 282 tree. And I think that's all my comments. Thank you.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yep. Good afternoon. Thank you for the presentation. I feel like, again, I'm echoing a lot of my colleagues' commentaries here. A few items, I'm a little less concerned about the transformer. I do acknowledge that there are the number of parking spaces needed in this area is of note. Increasing parking is always appreciated. However, the trade-off between one parking space and a potential transformer, to me, doesn't seem terrible. Peter, don't get too mad at me for that. However, I do feel a little bad for Wilkes and Bashford having 3 transformers in their parking lot at this time. It does appear that there's already 2 transformers there, and now they're getting a 3rd. So if that's just where the transformers are going, so be it. However, I do feel a little concerned that that specific nook of parking is now becoming more transformer parking than car parking. If that is the spot for it, so be it. But I would encourage some attractiveness to be going around that transformer. Those boxes are huge and ugly, and having it right near those, 3 new pedestrian crosswalks at that intersection is really not the most attractive thing in the world. So please have a little consideration and thoughtfulness for that exact location and or how that gets treated to make it visually appealing. I do love the 3 crosswalks coming in with the planting, the 3 planter boxes there. I agree with Board Member Balte that the bicycle parking in that location is not ideal. There's other spaces that could be considered. I absolutely adore the Paseo. I think that it is long overdue that there's a more pedestrian friendly pathway through that area of the shopping mall. I have gone through that Ralph Lauren passage quite a few times. I do always feel a little bit like I'm intruding because it's a little more private, where this paseo really will feel much more public and open and inviting. I'm really excited to see that happen. I think that the building itself is absolutely beautiful. I think that the material choices, the rhythm, the proportions, the scale, the texturing of it are really all coming together very nicely. And I would very strongly encourage any potential tenants to really take a good hard look at those renderings that have been proposed and to stick closely to them. I think that they really are the grids on the windows, the proportions, everything, like I've said, it's really quite striking. So for whoever potential tenants may or may not be listening, I do think that the architect has done a commendable job here, and their design intent and vision should be well noted, well taken, and well respected. The last item that I have is that the trash on the restoration hardware side, I do agree that it's not an ideal location. However, I'm not necessarily sure I have a good answer for what would be better. The possibility that it's a short run, that there could be a pickup very quickly from that spot, that you don't have to meander down the paseo. I would be very actually disappointed if the trash was down the paseo, because that's a tighter space. You'd have a longer distance to run with trash. So to echo Board Member Balte's comments, I would say that should be rethought out. However, I'm not very clear where a better spot would be. So I can understand the problem, and I'd be happy to listen to other proposals. But if this is what it is, I would understand that. I'm really excited about the plantings. I'm really excited about the lighting. Again, I would encourage to make sure that you have good, consistent, and appropriate illumination for that paseo. Make sure that safety and welcoming is important during that slightly smaller area, especially at nighttime. But overall, I think it's a really commendable job, a tremendous effort on the architect's part and the designer's part. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, everybody. Those are terrific comments by every board member. So if I might, I just try to review some of them. Certainly, Commissioner Rosenberg commented about the number of transformers, sort of looking at the TT&T on this side of the project. It seems to me that it's in excess. I wonder if it isn't possible to eliminate some of the other ones somehow here, to go back in engineering and figure that one out, because it sort of throws the emphasis of the transformers on the Wilkes-Bashford area there. And there just seems to be too many of them there. And I agree that's an issue. Going in order of where we started here, the bike issue is an issue. It almost seems like the ones on the east side are, there isn't an appropriate space there for bike passage and pedestrian passage to make it easy. Your planters or the smaller planters, ought to be kind of an open feeling entering onto the paseo without the bikes. So I would agree with that comment. And it seems like the opposite side, where you have a bike storage, could be expanded maybe to include more bikes, so that the people who are riding bikes can find their way to one side versus having bikes on both sides. So I think you should reconsider where the bikes are. On this particular site, there just may not be other appropriate locations for bikes, because you expect the sidewalks to be thoroughly used. The paseo certainly helps a lot with the from what we saw before, where all the access was from the other side. So it seems like it's a conflict between bike location and use of the Paseo appropriately and space on the eastern side. Trash, I agree with Commissioner Rosenberg. It's hard to find a really, really good location for the trash. And I would think it's up to the tenants and the relationship to the shopping center to make sure that the passageway on that side stays clean in some way, that they have the appropriate material to keep it clean every day. And that seems like the only place for it to happen. I'm kind of concerned if there are larger containers for trash. Is a door large enough to be able to bring out? I note that on the site plan, it's a double door. Just make sure that you can bring out the right kind of containers to bring it to the curb for pickup by garbage trucks. I differ with Commissioner Bolte a bit on the entry materials to the Paseo. I find there's either a good consistency of materials from one side of the building to the other in those elevations, or there's a differential with a larger sign element on the opposite side. So I find that the Paseo is just attractive from both locations, certainly shows that way in the renderings. And I think the choice of materials is very consistently done throughout the project. Just going back to that corner, that difficult corner, and the comment that Commissioner Bolte made about the 8-foot corner and chamfering it or finding a way to treat the exterior to make it a better passage. You know, Commissioner Rosenberg said the crossovers that are at the corner of the Wilkes-Bashford and coming across from that parking area are terrific, and they move into the space and there's space around. So it's a really nice pedestrian passage, which doesn't always happen in the shopping center, but this is really going to be very, very appropriately safe passage for pedestrians. You know, the site plan is incredibly improved from what was there before. The Paseo, as everybody's been saying, is going to be a wonderful kind of almost romantic space to be walking down. The lighting is, as indicated, is just a departure by using those two walls for string lighting above, keeping it light, and reminds me of European street scenes in some areas, which I've always loved. And I think it's going to be just one hell of an addition to the shopping center. People will migrate to that corner just to walk down that alleyway. The floor plan space is a very good question, you know, but it's your question to deal with tenants. And I think shopping center knows its tenants, and the size of whoever is going to go in there will be determined by the size of the space, I suppose. And it's not really sort of our concern, but it's a good question anyhow that you should ask yourselves. The tree removal issues, you know, I think sometimes trees have to give way to new improvements. And I would just suggest that, you know, we do have our Commissioner Bolte keeps a good eye on trees. And so I always respect that and continue to do that. But if you come back with a very good reason, I'm sure that we'll give it some serious consideration. Just again, I agree specifically with Commissioner Rosenberg's comments about the beauty of the building itself, the formal aspects of it, the proportions of the materials and the heights of the windows. There's a little weirdness about the distinction between height, the detail of the heights at one end from the other end. But, you know, you don't see the building really from a point where you can see both ends at the same time, unless you're two people talking to each other on the phone. So I'm less concerned with the slight variations than Commissioner Chen, is because you don't see the building that way. And I think what you have determined is that these proportions work at each end of the building. And I do like the proportions of the building and all of the materials. I'm concerned, and I think that as a board, we need to note that you've noted the items that are going to come back to us at a later date. So I can't see that, well, I'd ask for a vote on this, a motion, but that approving of it, except in absolute agreement with the materials and the forms and the shapes that are there, is complete at this time because so many things seem to lead to potential changes when you get tenants. So with that, can I ask somebody to make a motion as to?
Excuse me, Chair Hirsch, if I might, is it possible to get Board Member Thompson to give us her opinion on this? I really would value hearing what she thinks.
If she wants to, yes.
I don't think I can. I don't think I'm allowed to.
Why wouldn't you be allowed to?
Yeah, I think we've said previously that with other board members that you could give your opinion, but because you haven't been present for the whole hearing, that you would not be voting. So that part, that's up to you if you want to give your opinion.
I think there's tradition that goes both ways. Many people have come late to meetings, and surely you've been part of this, and I really want to hear what you think. So indulge me, please.
If can we say that if she has reviewed the material, if there's anything, in a way, I think I have summarized pretty much what everybody else has said. So if you would like to add to it, I would think it's reasonable.
Unfortunately, I wouldn't feel right, honestly. I
Okay.
knew that I was going to miss this first item. And so I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't prepare.
So I've asked for a motion. Would somebody be able to give me? Do you want to try?
I'm happy to make a motion. I'd like to put into motion that I'm going to make sure I've got my wording here correct. Provide staff with the direction that this should come back as a staff review level, and that we recommend approval to the proposed project to the Director of Planning and Development Services.
And the items that you'd like to come back for staff review, I can list off if you'd like.
Please.
So I was hearing some conversation about the transformers, just to take a second look at that, at the location and the screening for those. The bike parking locations, to take a second look at those and make sure that we have the 8-foot clearance and those sorts of things, and just the 8-foot clearance in general. Also taking a second look at the trash entrance, making sure that we can keep that area clean. And then a second look at tree removals.
Any friendly amendments?
Well, you don't have a second yet, Kendra, but I'm very uncomfortable allowing them to remove tree 282. That's the large mature tree at the end of the passageway at the left-hand side, the western side of this. And there's a whole string of trees down the middle of that. Removing it because of a utility connection just seems to me wrong. That tree's been there for 50 years and it's quite healthy, gives a lot of shade, a lot of green in the alley. If we don't make a strong statement, it's not going to happen. I'm also uncomfortable, I'll be blunt with you, that I really want to see what they're thinking about these bicycles. I don't think there's a lot of good places, and I think the shopping center is going to have to roll up their sleeves and find some more suitable places for bike parking. And, you know, we've been through this on each time they want to add a new building, they push, and they're not making accommodations for things like parking. And it's not fair to put it on the tenant. You could take some of their patio spaces, but I think we're being a little bit over optimistic to think that this is going to be able to be resolved with staff. So I cannot support that motion, even though it's not been seconded yet. I'm sorry.
On that tree location?
Chair, did you want to allow the applicant to speak about the tree location?
Yes, let's hear it.
I had stated before, and I just wanted to confirm with our design team that tree 282 location was The removal of that tree was proposed for utility work during construction. We have confirmed that. It is that we're connecting to existing utilities in very close proximity to that tree. It is the belief of the project arborist that the tree root system will likely be distressed during those connections, and that's resulting in the proposed removal of the tree. It isn't for another project feature, but to essentially allow for the connections of this project to all the underground utilities that exist in that area today.
So, in my experience.
So Chair, do we have a second for the motion? Chair,
Yes,
do we have a second for the motion?
I'm sorry?
Do we have a second for the motion?
No, we don't. We're just.
Okay, so we
discussing
should continue with that first.
Well, can I move then that we continue this project to a date uncertain, requesting the applicant to come back to us with the
Chair
revised
Balte.
design?
Okay, so Chair Balte, so are we hearing no second? And so the motion fails?
Motion fails, there's no second.
Okay, and so go ahead.
So I move that we continue this project to a date uncertain, requesting the applicant to come back to us with revisions to explore the idea of relocating the transformer, to explore the necessity of which trees really need to be removed, potentially saving tree 282, or providing really detailed arborist information as to why it cannot be saved, and showing us better bike rack locations.
Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Well, you need a second, David, for a motion. So somebody can second it and then we can discuss it.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
And Chair, you can second as well if you'd like to continue along those lines.
Is there a second? I don't see a second.
Okay.
I have a.
So if there's no second, then that motion fails. Is
Somebody
that?
else has to make a motion. Okay,
Or Chair, you could also second the motion.
No, I don't want to second the motion, but I would like to discuss it.
Well, we need a second before we discuss.
Okay, then, Board Member Chen, what would you propose?
Can I make a motion to continue this project to an ad hoc committee to review the items that Vice Chair Bolte just mentioned, like the bike parking and the tree issues? Generally speaking, I think the building itself and the site plan, it is welcoming and it is interesting. I think overall it's a very successful design. I don't think it is necessary to bring back the project back to the entire board again. I think that's why I like to make a motion for ad hoc committee to review the pending issues.
Just to clarify, it sounds like you're making a motion to approve the project subject to certain items going to the ad hoc committee? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I can second that motion.
Let's have a vote.
And so I'm hearing that in the ad hoc committee would review the bike locations, the potentially saving tree 282 or just getting some more information about that, and the transformers. I didn't hear anything about the 8-foot clearance or the trash.
Yes, Jody, you're right. I don't think there's sufficient support to request relocating the trash store or sufficient concern about the 8-foot clearance, so I didn't push that forward. I second that motion as it is.
All right, can we have a roll call?
So we could have discussion if need be. Otherwise, yes, we can move to a vote.
Well, to my colleagues, I wish we had more support about tree 282. It's a beautiful tree, and I think there's got to be a way to save it. We've gone through all kinds of effort to save other trees, X-raying the ground to find out where the roots are and things. The ad hoc committee is not the way to push this through.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't hear a lot of, okay, I can't make a friendly amendment to my own motion. No, I'll leave it stand at that. Thank you.
So could we repeat the motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve this project and subject to the ad hoc committee to review this project on the bicycle storage issues and the transformer issues, and also the existing trees, specifically the number 282 tree. We like to see the potential to save the tree.
The bike location?
Oh, yeah, I mentioned.
Okay. All right, it's been seconded. Right, Peter?
Yeah, I second that motion. Yeah.
And I'll conduct the vote. Vice Chair Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Could I request that the chair appoint the subcommittee, please, the ad hoc committee for this?
Will do.
I would like to be on that committee. If you could take that into consideration, please.
Okay. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
and if you'd like to do that now, Chair Hirsch, or you could do that at a later date.
No, it's fine to do it now.
Yeah, I like to.
Okay, Chen is also on the committee.
So am I hearing that Board Member Chen and Board Member Balte, Vice
Yes.
Chair Balte, I should say?
Mhm.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Thank you both. All very nice project. Looking forward to you coming back.
Thank you very much.
How about 10-minute break?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Hirsch, we can start. It's 10:22.
Okay, everybody there? Kendra?
Maybe we give her one more minute. 30 seconds. There we go.
There we go. Sorry about that. Took me a minute to find my button.
So I have a little announcement to make in between here, if we might, before beginning on the next item. With deep appreciation for all of what you do, I want to give you this a bottle of with some beautiful colored flowers in it. Does everybody see this? This is for an incredible effort over the past year plus. You stretched it out, and thankfully so. The less I do, the better it is. So, but you know, the colors of flowers are always significant. So I had to ponder over these for quite a while because I know color is really important for you. And you have done well in selecting along the way colors that were or were not appropriate for various buildings. So these particular colors, I just felt somehow, and if you look at them relative to your sweater, it's a perfect match. And I'm looking at them now, and they weren't even opening like this before. They are now open full. So thank you very, very much for a great year for leadership for all of us.
You're here.
Yay. Yes, thank you, Chair, former Chair Thompson. Yes, thank you.
So
Well,
now we
thanks
can
so
get down to
much. You don't have to
real
do that.
business here.
Thank you.
So the next item, get to the right page. Not there yet. Chair Hirsch. ARB's expertise could be better used in early portions of the planning entitlement to ensure outcomes that meet the city policies. Staff has attached several handouts that are used by the applicants when applying for architectural review. You know, and so a few things to say about this. You know, first place, I sent about some of the code, and you know, I'm not the best expert. Jody always corrects me. No, that doesn't apply to this. And so I'm learning about the code, but not in depth yet. However, there's some very interesting pieces of it. And if you don't mind, by the way, Jody, is Albert available to listen in on some of this?
The answer is yes. Unfortunately, I didn't give him a whole lot of ahead time, so he will be here in a few minutes.
Okay, so let's start. I'm sorry I have to do this with the earphones, the only way I really can hear well. So first place, there's under 18.23, there's an interesting chapter. I'm just going to read a couple of the pieces of the code, which I passed around to all of you. You know, just because they kind of clarify. This is an important one, the applicability of regulations, which is under 1823.010. Determination of final approval of the architectural and design elements of any project remains with the Director of Planning and Community Environment after recommendation by the Architectural Review Board pursuant to Chapter 1876 of the Municipal Code, the Director and the Architectural Review Board retain the authority to interpret criteria on a project-by-project basis in order to most effectively fulfill the specific purposes listed in Section A, that's above, provided that more restrictive regulations might happen in the further review in the building department. It's just the general statement of where we fit into everything. Then under the next one that I think is important just to have as a preliminary review under 18.76.020 is for the purpose of securing the advice of the Architectural Review Board prior to making an application for the board's recommendation on a project. Applicant, upon paying the fee, may bring design before the board for preliminary review. If the applicant wishes to proceed with the project, he or she must then file an official application. It's just the process there. Under pre-screening, the council does the pre-screening, so you all should just know how that process works. But so read 18.79, and I'm saying some of this because some of you are new to the process, and I assume haven't read all of this yet. So, and even if you have, it's a good idea to reread it. So developing, this is an important aspect of it here, is developing project preliminary review under this chapter 18.79 shall not preclude a project proponent from applying for preliminary review before the ARB as provided in section 18.76. Project proponents shall pay the fee, etc. But it does kind of mention the fact that there is the possibility that a applicant can come before us prior to an official, and this is one that Albert really has to speak to. Preliminary review, this is discussion of timing. Preliminary review study session shall not be for the purpose of taking evidence with respect to a development project. Neither the city council nor any city board, commission, committees, or staff person. And this is in 18.79. So under, I'm not sure what the key number is here, but under C, it says this, it mentions us, neither city council nor city boards, commissions, committees, or staff person may rely upon information obtained or comments made during the preliminary review process for any decisions unless such information commitments, they have to go before an official committee that's publicly notified. So that it's a matter of discussion and timing. And then finally, under multiple family context-based design criteria, and this is something which actually is kind of important because it was brought up by Peter at our hearing on the Bayshore project, and I bring it to your attention because it's part of the present multifamily context-based design criteria, and therefore is something that we should be discussing relative to the objective standards going forwards here, because this we noted is an important aspect of designing projects with multiple housing types. So it says diversity of building types under, again, it's B, but I'm not sure where it fits into the general number. Housing types greater than 2 acres, minimum of 3 housing types. So I just want to bring that to your attention because, in case you didn't know, Bayshore project was approved by the council. They basically, and it was presented to the council by the chair of planning, It was presented by the planning chair as a project to be approved. The PTC had also voted strongly in favor of it. And therefore, our opinions about that project were not recognized as significant enough by the council to look for additional consideration of it, and they wanted it to proceed. So that vote was taken, and so you should all know that that was done. And Ozma and Peter and I were all three of us at that hearing. Myself and Peter spoke about it. And so this is where we stand with it. And what seems to be clear from the process of this is that there are some issues that involve pre-planning, which I think would be helpful. And Peter has also spoken about this. So together we too agree that this is an important aspect to moving forward. And how this is done. Is Albert here yet?
Yes, Albert is a attendee right this second. We need to get him promoted.
Yes, I'm trying to promote Albert. Let's see. I think he would need to accept maybe on my, yeah, perfect. He is right now on the panelist side.
Okay, so he's coming over in just a minute. He'll be up. Yeah, and I'll get a link too, just in case I need to share some of the zoning code.
Okay.
So I did want to sort of continue along the lines that you were doing, Chair, that yes, the 2850 Bayshore project did get approved by council recently. It was I don't know that it was, they certainly didn't relish, going against the ARB. We do take, denial recommendations seriously, especially given how few that avenue is used. But I think there were legal requirements that the council needed to take into consideration. So, but we're happy to definitely have a conversation about, how we go forward with other projects, because this will, come up again. There will be other projects that take advantage of the SB 330, which is that limitation on the 5 hearings. However, we do now, or in the very near future, I think another week or two, we have the objective standards will be effective. And so we will have all of those regulations that we can use for new projects when we're reviewing new projects. Thank you.
A comment, Jody, on your comments in a way. The applicant for that Bayshore project noted that it would be kind of impossible for that project to have been reviewed because the prototype for it, what's it called again, Jody? The housing typology of that project is really not mentioned in the
Townhouse development.
Townhouse, thank you. Was not mentioned, was not a part of the objective standards yet. So somehow there's additional work to be done.
So I think that it's a little bit of a misnomer. The objective standards, a lot of the diagrams in the objective standards that we approved are for, they look like they're for mixed use buildings. But definitely during all of our deliberations, we made sure that they could also be used for townhouse projects as well.
So I think we really need to discuss how we proceed with the possibility of a pre-hearing meetings of some sort, whether it is by an ad hoc committee or a committee formed to study each one of these projects as they come on board, whether it's to divide the projects into different study groups by say 2 members of us, or whether it's in some general format that I think, Peter, you would like to speak to that one.
Yeah, if I can have a minute, this might be where our attorney comes in handy. Thank you, Mr. Yang. I will try and set you up here. We do have our current process, as you noted in the code, we do have code that talks about preliminary review. And so projects can certainly come to the ARB early and have that early discussion. And that is, we do always find that helpful. But that preliminary review with the ARB is not required. And so there are some applicants that skip that step. I know that previous boards, have not looked favorably upon that, but there's nothing, illegal about it. It certainly is a valid process and that they can go straight to the formal. That's why I did put in the packet, starting on packet page 43, you'll see the requirements that we have for preliminary review. You'll also see on packet page 45, you'll see the process that we, show to the world where it does say that preliminary review is strongly recommended. And then on packet page 46, we have the submittal checklist for the formal process. And let me see what else I have. Just on packet page 52, I had the architecture review process code section if we needed that. But mainly, we have a prelim process right now that is optional. And I hear the chair saying that, sorry, I'll go back. One of the other new things that I added to our agenda this time is that list of new projects. And so you saw under city official reports, you're seeing projects, ARB type projects, and actually a little bit more because I put pre-screenings in here as well. But you're seeing those types of projects when they first come in. You're just seeing, sort of the address and that sort of information. So if you wanted to do some early homework, you could. But that's where our attorney could weigh in on, sort of how much early homework we can do. Could 2 people as an ad hoc get together and do some early homework? I mean, that's where we want to be careful about, following the Brown Act and those sorts of things.
Selbert, available?
Yes, I'm here. And I'm sorry, I'm joining in a little bit late. So I might be missing some context about what our goal is in having early involvement.
David, can I speak to this a little bit? Is that helpful?
I'll let you speak, but Peter, I would like to actually respond first.
That's fine. I'm happy to step out of it.
Albert, we, both Peter and I have had some discussions about this and determined that specifically to the Bayshore project, we found that had we been involved, I think at an earlier date, there may have been a change in some direction in the project. And we look to creating a possibility of incorporating it somehow in some of the requirements in the code where we would form an ad hoc committee, some kind of a 2-person committee, maybe several of them, that was in fact reviewing in advance of an official hearing projects. And then how they are brought back to the board is a question. How and when they are brought back and how much discussion happens prior to, which we would like your input on. But it seems like there's something missing in the process here. Now, maybe, Peter, I'll let you speak and see if you agree with that and whether you would add to it.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I was going to give a little more of a broad background so the rest of the board understands what we're driving towards, David, and get Albert to focus his responses for us, if you want me to do that. I don't want to step on what you're doing, David, but I wanted to give some clarity to everybody so they understand what we're driving towards. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
So to the rest of the board, after having done this ARB stuff for almost 10 years now, it's becoming clear to me that if we have earlier involvement, especially on planning issues, we might help really smooth things out, get applications to go through smoother. So I'll give you an example. Just today, reviewing the thing on the shopping center, I think we all agreed that bicycle parking just hadn't been properly thought through. And just one or two comments to the applicant 3 months ago saying, hey, think about this, would have made it a lot easier. The application would have been more successful. And there's a lot of times we see this slight early involvement is really helpful. So the question is, first of all, do we agree that that's helpful or not? Assuming we all would, then the question is what format, what's the proper way to get our input to these projects? The city code has a whole process for preliminary architecture review. It's optional to applicants. So we can press with the staff about what can we do to make it more encouraged. I think maybe we check the fee schedule, but that's a whole set of discussions around that. David started asking the staff to put forward a list of projects in the pipeline, which Jody has put in our staff report this week, a whole list of projects. And one thought was that just by making those projects, making us aware of what's coming down the pipeline, any individual board member can go look at them and see what's in the public record. Those applications have drawings that are on the websites and you can see what's being proposed. And then we could have in pipeline. Those are where it starts to become questions for the attorney as far as whether that's appropriate or legitimate. We're supposed to be doing a quasi-judicial review, making informal reviews of things before they've been formally vetted and presented to us is questionable. Nonetheless, I could see it being incredibly useful to applicants and to us as a way of helping get the projects closer to where we want to guide them in a more efficient manner. Then there's the whole question of whether that's considered another meeting or not, a review. If there's only 5 meetings, is the preliminary meeting considered a meeting? Is a discussion of this agendized on the meeting a meeting? If only 2 of us, if we form a subcommittee instead, would that do? So in summary, I don't want to go on and on, but the first question to the board really is, do we all agree that this sort of initial involvement would be a good thing? Should we drive towards that? If we do, should we push harder to get architecture review itself, the formal process that's already in our code, somehow find a way to push harder for that? And then does that count towards one of these meetings on housing? If we go with this idea of having in the pipeline things just shown at us all the time, every meeting we have a list of what's coming up and then discuss it either agendized on our meeting or as an ad hoc committee. Is that a better way to go? So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's sort of the structure I see all this going towards.
Okay, I'd like to add a little bit to this because Jody has put in our book the preliminary ARB submittal requirements checklist. And in looking at that, you know, if you take items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually through cover sheet A, B, all the way through the building study, it's like a schematic or pre-schematic that really describes what a project is going to be. And it might not include three-dimensional imagery, detailed floor plans, detailed sections, roof plans, landscape plans, grading and drainage plan, lighting plan, green building program, tree protection. So if you strip out of the preliminary ARB submittal requirement checklist, it seems to me that this could be a good time for us to get into the process in some way. It would seem to me that sort of looking at this even before Albert speaks to it, that if we had some arrangement where either the chair and the vice chair meet with the design planning department representatives immediately after council screening of a new housing development project. This is specific to housing. It doesn't necessarily apply to all buildings, but in particular, you know, the state's requirements are specific to housing. So this is where we might have an impact in the housing project. So I differentiate these kind of projects from the other projects which we review, which seem to me that we are pretty, as demonstrated today, we have a pretty good capability of dealing with individual other projects. But the housing project is the specific one that is the short time span and approval process. This is the one that we are looking to help expedite the process and find a way that we can put our input into a project as you described. So then the vice chair and chair meet with the planning department. The planning provide ARB with a list of few relevant projects, both in Palo Alto. And this is because my feeling is that sometimes in these housing projects, we're really not aware of what the possibilities are until we look around town and in neighboring towns to find out what is there, that we photograph some of these projects, that if the discussion with planning is considered appropriate to include the applicant at this review, that's a possibility that they are invited. And that's an issue that becomes a legal issue then, Albert, for you to discuss. The work product for this review might include pedestrian vehicle. Well, it includes those items that I've outlined from the first piece that Jody has prepared for us there. The subcommittee would be given the opportunity to report on the scope of the meeting and identify the items that were reviewed and whether the applicant had accepted their suggestions or provided acceptable alternatives. So the time frame is kind of different there. If there are suggestions made by either the chair, the vice chair, or a committee of two, then those could be adjusted with the applicant at an early date. The full board should be scheduled to be calendared for an official presentation at the stage of a more advanced presentation. Normally, those are not called sort of preliminary. They are called advanced preliminary design because those packets are an extensive piece of work by then. And when you look at all of that and you say, yeah, well, we can look at this, but we can't question the basic assumptions that were made, then it became an issue, becomes a bigger issue. And then, you know, from all of that, then the board would create an advisory report and a summary of their recommendations for presentation to council. So this is a procedure which isn't really isn't normally something that we would do. But it's interesting to think about this because it would be a way that council could see the depth of our consideration of these planning issues. And it might interfere with the relationship that we have with planning, but it is nonetheless a written up piece of what we. Now, you know, I admit that this one might be kind of questionable, but it is something which is an issue here in particular. And I want to just mention one thing because it was brought up by Peter at the council hearing. And that was that in the site planning issues, specifically, it says, and Peter, you discovered this, that an over 2 acre site must have 3 housing types. And it meant to us typologies, really 3 different kinds of housing. If you look at what is described on the large multi-acre sites, and you look at the actual diagram that came with it, the actual building site drawing shows three very different kinds of site buildings. That might have had some effect on that particular project at an early stage, and it certainly didn't at a later stage when we got the larger project in its full development. So maybe out of all of this discussion and what specifically what Peter is asking could be discussed. Albert, if you could comment on some of that.
Yeah, so I heard a few distinct questions that I'll try to address, and please let me know if I've missed something. So first, there was a question about, is a preliminary hearing under our code, is that one of the 5 meetings? And typically the answer there will be no. So the 5 meeting limit comes into play after we have a complete application. And when someone has opted to do a preliminary hearing, that's before they've submitted their formal application, and so they're they don't have a complete formal application with us yet. I think,
Albert, could I interrupt you for a minute? How do you describe complete formal application?
Well, so we have our application checklist for an application. It's going to be different for a prelim than it is for the actual major AR or whatever it may be. When we do get an application, our planners will look it over and ensure that it includes everything that is required. And if it's missing something, we'll tell them that your application is incomplete and this is what you need to do to make it complete. So at some point, they will have submitted everything that they need to submit for us to review and act on the application.
Sorry to interrupt again, but when you're talking about a complete, are you using the preliminary ARB submittal requirements?
No, so
checklist?
David, no, he's using the formal checklist. So he's using the formal checklist. So if you take a look at page 46, what Albert is saying is that number one, they'd have to turn in a formal application.
Okay.
And number two, they'd have to give us all the things that are on this formal checklist.
Okay.
Only then could they be complete.
Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Right. So when someone chooses to do a preliminary hearing before the ARB, that's before they are submitting that formal application. And so that 5 hearing limit has not kicked in yet. I think I'm a little bit unclear on the list that Jody has provided of pipeline projects. I assume that those are projects that have submitted formal applications. Jody, is that right?
Yes, these are projects that are recently on file and will likely come before the ARB.
Okay. So at that point, if we wanted to have some sort of early hearing with them, that would count towards the 5, assuming that they had submitted everything that they needed to do. So once you're getting a project on that list from Jody, that seems to be that's someone who has submitted a formal application. So then there was a question, well, okay, can we look at that list of projects and do some research and then, come to a meeting of the ARB and provide some of our early comments? I would advise against that because the applicant, won't know that you're going to be commenting on their projects and they won't have an opportunity to speak to that. And so I wouldn't do that. We could conceivably have a process where you say, hey, I'd really like to make some early comments on, this project. And let's do that at our next meeting. And at which point the applicant would have notice and they'd be able to show up. The public would have notice as well. But that would then count as one of the 5 meetings because we have a formal application. So I don't think that is really a practical approach to this. Then there was a question, can we have a subcommittee look at this list of early projects and do the homework and make the comments, maybe speak with the applicant instead? And I think that does work because a subcommittee isn't the whole board. It's not a formal hearing of the board. So it doesn't count as one of the 5. the issue that you'd run into is just making sure that that subcommittee doesn't grow beyond just the two, right? And so you're not, you're complying with the Brown Act. And then what the subcommittee could do is after they have that meeting, they could come to, a formal meeting of the board, the whole board. And at the end of the meeting, when you have, an item for, committee comments, board member comments, they could report out anything relevant. But again, that wouldn't be an opportunity for discussion. It would just be an opportunity to report out.
Yeah. Comments?
I have a question for Albert Yang, the attorney, if that's okay, Chair Hirsch.
George, go ahead.
Albert, if we were to form a subcommittee to review this, could we have a standing subcommittee, say if every year the chair appointed 2 board members? Is that considered an ad hoc committee, or does it have to be for a specific project?
So once it becomes a standing committee, it's no longer ad hoc. And so different rules then apply. And so I guess I would recommend if the board wanted to have this sort of subcommittee approach to this, that it be, on a kind of project by project basis and not a standing committee that does this work.
Would it be fair to consider the project reviewing all of the projects in the pipeline at any given time then? Because it's hard to specifically pick one of them. The whole idea is to review what's in the pipeline. If every meeting they were appointed to a different committee, I mean, it's very difficult to make that concept of a subcommittee work if it's not over time.
I'll have to think about that a little bit. And I guess I'm a little bit unclear if you are suggesting that, you would have one subcommittee of 2 members, look at the list that's provided on a specific day. Maybe it's three or 4 projects. And then when there's a new list, it'd be a different committee of two members, or if you're suggesting more continuity.
Okay, well, I'd like it to be more continuity, but I think, David, we should get everybody else involved in this discussion because we're getting ahead of whether the board even wants to pursue this or not, in my opinion. But I do appreciate, Albert, you're answering the question. So I don't know, Dave, how you want to push this. I'd like
guess
to be a standing committee.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'm realizing I would like to make one other comment about sort of the interaction with housing projects and the ways, that the board can influence those projects. Taking Bayshore as an example, my understanding is that Bayshore did come in for a preliminary hearing before the board. And so they did get early feedback, and then they got formal feedback as well. And the issue perhaps isn't necessarily the timing of the feedback, but simply that the applicant was not receptive to the feedback. And that is something that state law has now, allowed housing applicants a position that it's allowed them to take. Because for housing applications that comply with our objective standards, the city has very limited discretion to deny or reduce the density of those projects. What we can do is apply conditions to the approval of those projects. And so the more effective way, if an applicant is unreceptive to the board's suggestions, would be to fashion very specific conditions. And I know this is something the board has resisted traditionally, is to, sort of design the project from the dais. But that is like
The video just cut out for me. Apologies for interrupting. The video cut out for me. I want to make sure that it's still good for everybody else.
We're
I'm sorry.
hearing,
Can everyone else hear me?
yes.
Yes, we can hear and see everybody.
Okay, then that's on my end. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I know this is something the board has resisted in the past, but in the case of housing projects that comply with our objective standards, if there is a design issue that the board is unhappy with, but it's still compliant with the objective standard, it's really the only way to address that issue is to specify what needs to be done instead.
Can I ask you, Albert, then, does that mean that it has to be in the objective standards? It would have to, the objective standards would have to include language which dealt with issues which we could imagine that might be required for our approval.
Not necessarily, because the objective standards try to do a lot, but they aren't totally prescriptive, right? So I think they probably don't speak to color, for example, and so if the board thought, these colors really need to be lighter or something like that, even if that's not specified in the objective standards, it could be a condition of approval. But we might be in a situation where the board actually needs to specify with or provide more specificity on the type of color, as opposed to saying it needs to be more compatible with the neighboring structures.
So, and Albert, if I may, there's in the future, we're going to have two different kinds of projects and maybe more than that. But the Bayshore project was an SB 330, which had the 5 hearing limit, but it was still discretionary. And so we certainly could make, the objective sort of conditions for that project. Whereas other types of housing projects may be going through the streamlined objective standards 1 hearing process. And those would just need to adhere to the objective standards as we've written them, correct? Or would we also be able to put conditions on those?
We would still be able to put conditions on those, but again, they need to be, a different kind of condition than we're used to, I think, and a more kind of specific condition.
So, Albert, you mentioned color, which is, one aspect of what we look at, but sort of preliminarily, we look often more at site planning issues. And so what about something like that, where we would say that, for example, if it were possible, if there were 3 different housing typologies was written into the objective standards, or if we could come along at a later date, or without those written into the objective standards and say, well, it is required that there be 3 different housing typologies on this particular site, and we prefer that this is considered in your presentation.
If I may clarify before Albert answers, we do have, in the context-based design criteria, we do have some language that talks about diversity of housing types. The language in context-based design criteria is not 100% clear. And so, for the Bayshore project, we were looking to the board to help us interpret that language. However, in the objective standards that we have recently approved, we have made that language more clear, that it does need to be different housing types, as in, so if you were on more than 2 acres, it says you need a minimum of 3 housing types. And by that, we mean, condos versus townhouses versus detached. It has to be, very different types of units.
So, yeah, I heard, 2 questions there. Is one, if we have an objective standard that requires, those different housing typologies, can we require that? And if we do have that objective standard, absolutely. That's something that they will need to comply with unless they want to go through kind of the full traditional ARB process. if there is some issue where we don't have an objective standard, let's imagine that we didn't have that housing typology language that Jody was just speaking to. We could still condition the project approval on having different housing typologies, but we'd have to figure out how to make that work as part of that condition. I think we typically have said, this project needs to have different housing typologies, and then we leave it to the applicant and the applicant's architect to figure out how to respond to that feedback. But in the kind of world going forward with housing projects that do meet our objective standards, we would need to, as part of the condition, explain how it would be done.
Excellent, Albert. My opinion, I'd like to kind of throw this more open to others to talk about this and how, we pretty much expressed it, and Albert has really given us some excellent advice here. What's your feeling going forward?
I got something.
Asma?
Okay, well, yeah, had a chance to think about this for a little while. And I have some, and Albert, your feedback was very helpful. I kind of want to iterate, or at least state maybe the obvious, that that we are a reviewing board. So we review projects after they've been thought of by a designer and developed by a designer, architect. And that's different than being like a generative board. It's different than like, we're not generating the design ideas. We're reviewing design ideas that have already been generated. And I think that's a key distinction because in that sense, we don't have any partiality to anything that's come in front of us. We don't have anything where like, this is my baby, so I'm going to be biased and I think I need to approve this. We come from all different backgrounds. We have different perspectives. And the virtue of our board is that we are impartial and that we have, being that as our mandate, I actually have a lot of issue if we were to create a subcommittee of 2 people that would review a project in front of it coming in front of the whole board, because I could very easily see that the project may get influenced by those 2 people. And then the project may come to the full board and get completely different direction because the 2 people will not be the majority. And I can see an applicant being really frustrated by that, where say the subcommittee were to give a direction and it came in front of the board and the rest of the board decided that that wasn't the right direction. That's sort of pushing the applicant back and forth. What's nice about our current process is that we are all a clean slate when a project comes in front of us. And we all have a chance to hear each other's thoughts and vote as a board together. And then the ad hoc committee that maybe gets assigned after we've all seen a project together knows the thoughts of the board, knows the things to look for when they're reviewing things. An ad hoc committee always, whenever we're on one, we're always looking at the list of what the board asked them to look at. And we have to be faithful to what the board wants, whether we individually want it or not. And so I have a lot of trepidation. I'm worried that those 2 members that might screen a project in front will end up creating a lot more havoc. And I understand we are focusing on this one project in front of us. And I do agree with Albert that this is just one project. And I disagree, Peter, that maybe we could have told those guys to move the bicycle parking somewhere else, but that's what ad hoc committees are for. They didn't really need to know that 3 months ago. It's okay that they can get that feedback now, and it's something that they can work on. And it's not a huge headache. That's not a huge thing to fix. So I don't know that this project could have benefited from that feedback 3 months ago. And I also maintain that I don't know that this Bayshore project that we're discussing, we gave them feedback in a prelim. Some applicants won't be receptive to it, and that's okay. That's just how it goes. But I think the majority of the projects, like Jody mentioned, we don't deny projects very regularly at all. And it's because I think our process already works in that way. So that's my 2 cents.
Can I say something? Yeah. First, I'd like to thank David to send out those code related stuff. I read it and I think it helped me better understanding what's going on for the current process. And generally speaking, I think I'm support of an early screening for certain projects. And I understand your concern about the subcommittee for the 2 members. Maybe they will not review the entire board's feedback or comments or thoughts because we are coming from different background. So I thought maybe we need to somehow regulate what areas we need to focus on for those pre-screening process. Like currently, I think why the site analysis is important because when it comes to building design, like the elevations, the massing, and the materials, it already being a different level. It will be a more developed design. But for site planning, it is the very first thing we need to solve. Like we need to solve the zoning, the vegetation, like the trees, and also the traffic, the circulation, the pedestrian or the bicycle, or just in general the circulation, and also the infrastructure, and also the contextual analysis. I think this pre-screening is more focused on the overall site planning instead of more detailed developed things. So, and also I think why it is important to be involved in the early stage is because when people produce a package like this, it takes time for them to just produce a graphically beautiful package. So if we can involve early during the site plan phase, I think it will benefit everybody, and it will not be like when somebody work months on this project and suddenly some strangers coming said, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Everybody will feel offensive in that case, right? If we can be involved in the early stage, I think most of the design teams are open-minded at the very early stage, at the site planning phase. That's why when we're doing our own projects, we always have the design charrette at the beginning, right? We want to hear different inputs. So that's why I think it is important. So my thought is then what's the appropriate timing and the deliverables we need to ask for this kind of reviewing.
Kendra?
I mean, I guess I have one big sort of outstanding question for this whole thing is that are we trying to make it so that this prelim is required, or it is at our discretion, or it's at the applicant's discretion?
I think we're still discussing it. So any thoughts on either way, I think. Yeah.
Okay, because to me, I do find that if it is required for all projects, we are simply adding another hurdle. We are simply sort of creating another moment for delay, for stress. Board Member Thompson, I really valued your input on this as well. And I think that, there is the possibility for frustration and miscommunication when 2 members might agree with one thing, but that's not the majority, and 3 other members might completely disagree. And then the applicant and the client are left feeling like, well, we did everything we were supposed to do, and we still got the short end of the stick. I can see that being a big problem. I also valued Mr. Yang's input regarding the project under discussion, that the issue was really mostly with the applicant's sort of unwillingness to take the input from the board and move forward with it. So in my mind, I am completely open to the concept that if a applicant would like to get an initial read, knowing that it is non-binding, knowing that it is, as board member Chen said, sort of high level, mostly site plan based, really tackling some of these large sort of zoomed out scale issues. If they want to take that on as the applicant, I'd be happy to support that. And I'd be happy to, create an ad hoc committee at that. Well, I guess, I don't know if ad hoc committee is the right term, but a 2-person review at that time to sort of provide an assist to the applicant. To make it required of all projects makes me very uncomfortable. It's and I sort of also think that it places a burden on us as the ARB to, if we were to proactively look ahead and say, oh, we think that this is going to be an issue, let's look at it. That isn't our job. Our job is not to have, our job is to review what's presented. And that's where I also appreciate the ad hoc committees and what they are useful for. The concept that after the presentations have been made, that we can still have some minor tweaks, not delaying a project for something like bicycle racks, not delaying a project for something like a color or minor material change, right? I think that that's where we should really focus on those moments and focus on the ad hoc committee's input. Again, once the full board has had a chance to review together. So at this time, I could support if the applicant was seeking out a preliminary, informal, non-binding meeting. I'd have a very hard time supporting this being required in any way, or sort of every single project that comes down the pipeline. I think both of those would be a bit strenuous for everybody involved. I'd love to hear more comments from my board members if there are some. Thank you.
I'd like to just jump in here, Peter, before you, and just say that Albert really was very strong about one aspect that I thought was very useful, and that is that the objective standards really will be the applicable regulation from here on out. And Jody's noted that what's the matter? Oh, okay. Jody noted that improvements have happened since we have reviewed, and staff has been working on this, to kind of tighten it up. And I think that's really an important aspect to think about, because whether or not we are able to insert ourselves by requirement or whether we do it by option, the objective standards are going to be there for sure. And it looks like that's by far well, I won't say it's the best opportunity, but it is perhaps a very good opportunity. And if you think about this alternative as to whether it's by requirement or by applicants requesting it, if we know that the objective standards are there and they cover issues that Commissioner Chen brought up, then we're going to be more comfortable, and maybe we could be useful at an earlier stage in just pushing towards this. And so they understand that these are going to be the requirements, So for example, under the Bayshore project, had there been that regulation, we would have seen a very different project, very, very different from what is now approved. So Peter, would you take over here?
Sure, it's a great discussion. I think everybody's comments are certainly influencing my thought. I'll take what Osma said, because I think she's spot on that it's critical that you give consistent advice to applicants, and having 2 members speak for the board, she's right. Even if they say they're not, people will listen to that. I want to throw out a flip side of it though. In my company, probably once a month, we have a project before a review board such as ours. And one of the constant frustrations for us is that we don't really know what the board is going to think or what they do. We're not going before this board on maybe once a year, every 2 years. So we just had a project in front of the board in Atherton regarding a tree. Atherton just changed their policies on trees. I really couldn't guess what was going to be the outcome of this. I'm not doing my clients much of a service. It's a huge vacuum. Anything I can do to get some sense of what the board thinks. If I could have had access to 2 of those board members to hear their opinion, I would have greatly valued that. I think it's wrong, Ozma, to think that we're just judicial and we want to stay above and beyond all of this and just pass judgment at a specific time. We want to be participatory to help guide projects the best way in any way that we can. And I think a little bit more flexibility how we do that, I think is actually a good thing for applicants too. Yes, we don't want to give them official advice at the wrong time. But I'm saying all this because what I think the best solution would be is to take our preliminary process that's already established, but find a way to make it easier for people to go through that voluntarily. We don't want to force it. But again, when I have a project, 2 or 3 years ago, we had one go through the Palo Alto ARB process, and I didn't want to go through the preliminary thing. Like Kendra was saying, it's just another big set of drawings to put together. It's another big stress point. It's another round of billing for our clients. That's $10,000, $20,000. The application fee itself is $5,000. You can't blame people for not wanting to do that. What if we said we want to try to work with staff to come up with a really simple, informal, preliminary review ARB process before the entire board, publicly noticed, but with minimal, maybe 0 fee to the applicant, 0 requirements for fancy drawing sets, civil engineers, details. Just show us what you're thinking. We'd love to talk to you. If we do it before the board, everybody's putting their opinion, we can publicly notice it. It's not that we're dying for projects, we can do this. Maybe that's a better solution in the end. That fine, if people want to come to us, let's see if we can get them to come in. I promise you, Jody, if you make it free, people will do it more. If you reduce the amount of drawings required, you don't feel like your staff has to go through it all. We're all pros. We can make a lot of hay out of what we get. Just have them come to us with whatever they want. My last comment, whenever I was on or have been on ad hoc committees, I usually like to ask an applicant afterwards, so how did the process go? What do you think? And a lot of feedback I get from people, especially older designers who've been around, is, gee, we used to be able to just sit around the table with you guys and talk about it. And they rue that. They want that ability to just, hey, here's what we're thinking on the layout. What do you think? And get that feedback. It's so valuable to a design professional to have a sense to be able to tell your clients, this is where I think it will go. And I can tell you from my own experience, it's not that easy to be able to make that judgment. And I think a lot of people look at our committee in the same way. They feel like we're a vacuum. I'd like to be able to bridge that gap a little bit. So maybe that's an idea that we could try to get some even less preliminary, more preliminary review process. So
Is it okay if I respond really quick?
You
Yeah.
want to
Respond? Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
just
Oh.
first? I think that the preliminary ARB submittal requirements checklist is pretty damn good up to item C, at which point from D, E to M, it gets detailed so that you're into the $25,000 to $30,000 at least development of a project. But up to C, it's pretty good. That's at least what I can see. From an architect who's worked on projects like this, I've found that this is the point at which you really need, especially for housing projects. And that's most of what I spent my life on. So I think that up to that point, it's very useful. If it goes beyond that, there's going to be resentment for having public meetings that tell them, go back to the first part of it. Site planning, those issues that Commissioner Chen mentioned are primary. And those are the kinds of issues that you really want to be sitting around a table with them and say, have you considered this or have you considered that? And from our experience, whether it's 2 members or can't be more than 2 members, as Albert says, and if it's ad hoc, it seems like that's the way to go for legal reasons. And if the objective standards, which are being revised as we proceed, you are proceeding with it as a staff, and perhaps we should have more input, which is another discussion. We should at least know all of the objective standards as they are being changed as well. I give you the right to use your intelligence for all of what you do. And that list, for example, is incredible improvement for us to begin with, the project list that you provided. But I think we need to be a little more involved in the ongoing objective standards as they keep resolving themselves. They don't necessarily, it seems they don't have to be final until they're final. So it's a good idea to find out when they're going to be final so that we might have some input. So Ozma.
Yeah, I just want to focus on the early review more than anything else. I think, I heard Albert say that a preliminary hearing with the full board does not count towards the hearing numbers. And so, Peter, I really like your idea of finding a way to make preliminary reviews easier. We have in our agenda, we always have oral communications, which is for any member of the public to discuss something that's not on the agenda. But I wonder if we have something that might be like oral communications, but maybe has like people sign up or something, and maybe it's like a roundtable discussion, as you say, Peter. Maybe it's roundtable discussions. Maybe that's what we call it. And people like staff, because I'm sure the fees are because staff has to do a bunch of work. And so if there's minimal work on staff's end, where if an architect just wants to sign up for a really quick 15-minute, here's what we're thinking, and maybe all we need to know is the location and the program or something. Maybe it's just very minimal so that staff doesn't have to do a ton of work. But we can do that in front of the full board so that we're not having to single out 2 people and give an applicant frustration one way or the other. And it can be public and it can be sort of early review, and that could kind of maybe check all the boxes. And it's at the applicant's discretion as well. What do you guys think?
I like it, but everybody else.
I like it too.
Yeah, I like it. And also I want to add something. I think that this discussion will be like more two-way communication. Like if it happens in early stage, then maybe we can also hear from the applicant side what's their concern about certain things or any restriction on what is not our knowledge before, like depends on the type of the building, right? So also, I think our input at this moment should be very objective, like to let them know what we care about, like the vegetation, we want to keep the trees and the circulation, like the 8 feet clearance that we always comment on the shopping mall projects. It could be just very objective inputs instead of very personal, like I think you should do this or you should do that. No, we are not in the role of the designer. So we just want to, I think the board, eventually our goal is to help all the applicants to make a better, beautiful building in the city, right? So, yeah.
So if I may, just from a staff perspective, sort of, we have the prelim process on the books. It is not required, but people can certainly go through that process right now. Under the current process, it probably does take 2 or 3 months to get on an agenda, once a prelim is submitted. We could look at, narrowing down that sort of time frame. I think my concern about, people just walking into a hearing and wanting to discuss a project is that staff wouldn't have the time to go through the zoning analysis. And there's certainly, most architects are fairly good about respecting zoning, setbacks, height limits, that sort of thing. But, there's certainly some that miss a few things. And so, that can change a project if they're not in conformance with code.
Jody, I'm more than comfortable looking at something without a staff analysis of zoning and still being able to say, some of these site planning issues we're talking about. And I think everybody understands that it hasn't been fully vetted. I think if I could address this, Osma's idea of using the oral communications part of our agenda, I think has some merit. Do we have Albert Yang with us still? I'd like to know if we encouraged an applicant to just come to us as an oral communication and we remove the 3-minute limit, is that then a legitimate way to review a project essentially? And we're trying to find a way, Albert, that simplifies it, reduces the cost, cuts out the legalities. Can we do that?
Yeah, so the board cannot comment and discuss items that are raised during oral communications because those are not agendized.
You're making it tough, Albert.
If I may, one of the other things that we do with the ad hoc committees, we don't have as long of a lead time on those. So if you're comfortable not having the zoning analysis and we're literally just taking a plan set from an applicant and giving it to you to discuss, that sort of thing, I can probably turn around in 2 weeks or so and, get it on an agenda, get a plan set out to you in the normal packet. And I think then we could put that as a study session, correct, Albert? And then we could have a true discussion.
For $100 fee, could we do that?
A little more than $100, but we could get it less for sure. But although we also, council has to approve fees and those sorts of things. So that's not, and we just did a whole fee study. So that's not something I can do tomorrow.
Albert, is there any other way we could fit this in without having going back to council?
I was gonna just suggest.
Yeah, I'm sorry for cutting you off, Osma. Go ahead.
And I guess while Albert's thinking about your question, Peter, I guess I was kind of thinking outside of oral communications that we would actually have a separate category that would be roundtable discussions, because study sessions, I guess it could be called a study session as well. Is that how prelims are thrown in as well? Prelims are thrown under study session?
Prelims are a study session.
Okay,
Yes.
so maybe it's just under study sessions then. But I guess I wonder if there is, usually like, for example, like this study session didn't require an applicant fee, right? To talk about this. But if there is something that maybe has to go through something like a fee that's different, then maybe we do call it something different. Like maybe we call it a roundtable discussion or something where if an applicant wants to apply for a roundtable discussion, this is the fee, this is the turnaround time, and we probably need to get council to approve it. But that was my initial thinking after hearing what you were saying, Peter.
So just to clarify, if the code doesn't have a whole lot of language around prelims. And so I think we have the ability to change that. If you wanted to do, the 2-3 week version that I'm talking about, where at least we get a plan set in your packet and we are able to put it on an agenda as a study session so that you can discuss it. I think that, couple of week prelim process we could do right now. It's only the fee itself that I can't change immediately.
I also wouldn't want it to detract from a more legitimate prelim meeting, I guess. Like one that maybe has more documentation, that maybe the applicant wants the zoning analysis and wants, all of that. Because I think we've been through that process, and I don't want to discount that process either. So I would be worried about conflating the two because they would have different treatments.
Any help for us, Albert?
Yeah, I think that the study session concept does work, but I don't think there is a way around if we're doing sort of project specific work as a staff, going to the council to approve whatever the fee might be for that.
But Albert, the study session would count as one of the 5 meeting requirements for 330 projects?
Right. So it depends on whether this is happening before or after they have submitted their formal application and that application is complete.
I think it's important that this be before that. We'd have to structure whatever you say about it, that it's just informal. Would that be possible, Albert, if we made a preliminary checklist or something? I mean, I don't even want to do that. Just the designers will know what to bring.
Right. So the question is, can we make it mandatory?
No, I don't think any of us are looking to make it mandatory.
Okay.
I haven't heard that from the board.
Okay. So yeah, if it remains optional, we can have it be something that comes in before you do your formal, and that would not count towards the 5 hearings.
Is there a limit for how many prelims? Like could an applicant do this pre-prelim and then do a more in-depth prelim? And is there a limit, I guess, on how many times?
So there's not a limit under state law. I think in the past, the city has said, we only want to do one to sort of preserve city resources. But if we're changing the scheme or our priorities, that there's no state law limit on that.
Peter and others, I still wonder why you would object to this being more of a requirement than an option. What if most of them say, oh, we really don't want to bother with this part of it. We want to go the whole way, knowing that there's a kind of a limited number of review possibilities, or like in the Bayshore issue, there's a resistance to doing some suggestions that we made specifically about underground parking, which could have been a portion of the parking requirements and changed the site planning significantly. So if it became a kind of a requirement, what's the problem there? Is it that, we might just come up with a bunch of ridiculous criticisms of the project that, or as we have today, for example, shown that we can really get together and make some very definitive suggestions that we all agree upon.
I bet Kendrick can address that question.
I'm not sure. I really am on the fence. I have an issue making it a requirement because we are now forcing the client to go through an extra hoop, right? We are forcing the applicant to do this extra step. Having it be voluntary, they are already willing and open to receiving whatever input we give them. If we are requiring it, I'm not so sure they're as receptive. I like the concept. Again, with housing projects, I loved when we could walk into Palo Alto, sit down at the desk with somebody, just have a very quick review of what the plans were. We'd hand sketch out any adjustments that need to be made. Knowing that it's informal, knowing that the staff, like Jody was saying, hasn't reviewed zoning, knowing that there could be other things that come up, but at least we get, like Peter was saying, a little bit of input early and get that valuable information. Like he was talking about with the trees in Atherton, right? Getting that input early. But I'm very, very hesitant to make it a requirement.
I think I'm also hesitant to make it a requirement. I think it's fine for us to advertise to applicants that we recommended, like strongly recommended. And I think if we can come up with something that is more affordable, that is less work for staff, that's a more streamlined process for them to get preliminary feedback, then I would be in support of that. But I still wouldn't make it a requirement because honestly, there are projects that don't require it. Like it's not going to be like there's some projects that, you know, have done their homework in some ways. And so I don't want to necessarily penalize everyone just because, you know, it could have benefited one project.
And I would agree with that as well. I think that it definitely adds an extra step for some of these people that have done their homework and have done a good job and don't need the extra step. However, that being said, like I've definitely had moments with my own firm, my own projects where I'm like, I really wish I could have just had a 10-minute conversation with somebody. And I think sort of keeping that open as an available option is beneficial. Maybe it's like office hours at a college where you could come in and we set up even a different time where there's 2 people available at a specific set time. You have a question, you can literally come in and bring your plan in person, and there can be just a very informal view. I don't know the legality of that, but keeping it informal, keeping it at sort of a small scale and voluntary makes some sense. And I do hear the concept that staff is already, you know, overworked. I totally understand that. And that if we can keep this to the board and the volunteers, maybe that would help alleviate some of this pressure of time and effort.
One thing to keep in mind, David, perhaps is that we're looking to use our power of persuasion, our strength of having good ideas. The more this is voluntary, the more receptive people will be, the more we really have a chance to get them to make a difference. The more you force it, the more it's required. Some people will just be more closed-minded. And I think that what we're talking about is something I'd like to think, at least, that we have to have good ideas. It's really got to be something that is a collaborative design process. We're able to make strong stuff come out of this. And so I think being voluntary is okay on that account. I also am concerned not knowing what the fee would be. The moment you send it to city council, it's going to get to be more expensive. And I hate fees. It just adds up very quickly to the cost of a project. So it's very hard for me to see making it mandatory now. Maybe what we say is we could try this out and see if it works well enough and see how many people take advantage of it. If it addresses this bigger issue we're talking about, trying to get a little bit of feedback up front.
All right, well, you know, I could see us doing it that way.
Sorry, I think Yingxi had a comment also.
Keeping an open mind about how it proceeds and how successful it is. And later on, if it isn't successful enough, maybe we would change our mind. But if it's successful, of course, then it's very useful. And then, you know, the issue is multifold in a way, because the client, the applicant, doesn't want to spend $25,000, $30,000, but then develop a project with all of that detail, and then have us say that something is basically wrong with it. No doubt they don't want that. But I want to point out that on the Bayshore project, you know, you have always said that here that it's important that they are putting all this soil in here. Why aren't they just building a little parking underneath it instead? And would they have changed had we come to them early and suggested, well, a lot of things would be alleviated if you put parking below grade. At least a portion of the project could have been put below grade, and made that suggestion very early on. Would that thought have changed that project in any way?
We made that suggestion in the prelim.
I'd like to think that if I had a half hour with the people doing that project, I could have given them a persuasive argument, at least for why that would be a better economical solution to their project, as I would treat any of my clients. They respect me enough to want to listen, to pay for my time. And then the idea has to stand on its own merits. So ultimately, I'd like to think that what we're asking for really is a chance to put forth different ways to think about it that maybe some people aren't thinking about. But you're right, Esma, Yingqi hasn't added her 2 cents to this.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think at this moment, maybe it's not necessary to put it mandatory. I think it's open to voluntary. And also another thing is, I think maybe our concern is more about site plan. So maybe it's more about the major architectural review thing instead of all the projects, because some of the minor projects, maybe it's not necessary to go through this extra step.
So we've been talking about this for
Yep.
about an hour and a half.
Yep.
How do we want to wrap this up?
Yeah, and I did want to mention that Albert did need to leave us, so I don't believe he's on the call anymore. But we appreciate his time and his ability to come to this meeting. I guess what I was hearing so far, and I'm not the last word on this for sure, but maybe for the moment, I can talk to my staff about having sort of these 2 different preliminary paths. We can have the standard version that takes a couple of months because my staff needs to do a zoning review. And we can have the other version that takes a couple of weeks because it's just a matter of, sort of getting it on an agenda. So those are my takeaways, but please let me know if that's incorrect.
Well, I think it's pretty much the board's opinion that that's a good idea to push forward on that. I think I would personally encourage that the shorter process gives us probably enough information that we could develop out of our expertise responses that would be very, very useful to a potential applicant or an applicant. I think that's generally this board's opinion, that it could be useful. It seems to me that there are a number of scope issues that were discussed that could be refined if you needed a description, but I find it to be right there in the book as you presented. The preliminary ARB submittal requirement checklist up to A, B, and C is really going to be plenty if you look at it carefully enough. And we don't need all of the lighting, et cetera, as well to comment on site planning issues, transportation issues, et cetera. I'm sure an awful lot of this is in the objective standard. So I don't think we really need we don't need a motion on this. This is just a discussion. So I think we're in good shape here.
Almost don't know if we need a straw poll, since I think I heard every board member express support. I said I almost don't even think we need a straw poll unless the board thinks we do, about asking staff to, I guess the question is, would we ask staff to look into what a shorter review period might be? And then is this something that we would revisit? And eventually, is this something that we would have to propose as like a new part of our process to council?
I think I think for the fees, we're really, like, a month or 2 ago is when we were approving fees. And so we'd have to sort of wait a year to change fees. And so I think we have time to try out, these 2 new prelim ideas and see where we want to go with them.
Jody, can I ask you, there's no fee to put something on the agenda, say a study session, is there? The fee is strictly for one of these applications prescribed in the code, right?
Well, for the ARB themselves to put something on the agenda, no, there's no fee. For an applicant, Where my staff's having to spend time on that, there's got to be some sort of fee.
If some public member, we had a guy want us to review the colors of the light poles for Caltrain. And he pushed enough that he got us on the review, and you called it a study session. We did a study session for the color that had been previously approved on the Caltrain poles. There was no fee for that, was there?
It is possible as a one-time item that there was no fee for that. But we're talking about a regular process that's what we're talking about as a regular process.
So my question is, could we explore this idea of doing a study session specific to a given project by a given person or party and agendizing it without charging a fee? Just call it a study session. And all staff is doing is agendizing the item, typing out the address, putting it on the calendar, making the public notification. Public meaning putting it in the record.
Can I interrupt this just a minute? All of the projects that you've listed on here, Jody, that are the projects coming up, have those all been already with fees attached to them?
Of course, yeah.
So there's different fees for different processes. And so there's a variety on here as far as, the SB 330 prelim application, there's a sign application. So these all have different fees.
What were those fees, the initial fee that you would pay and it would take you through?
Well, some of these are formal applications. You have one actual prelim architecture review for 800 San Antonio. So that is a standard prelim that will come before you. But I think I can talk to the director about what fees we can charge. There are a few other fees that we have, so I can talk to the director about that.
Another suggestion might be if an applicant has already chosen to do a prelim, maybe there's a 2-for-1 deal where when they've chosen to do the prelim, maybe there's like a initial pre-zoning analysis meeting, and then one afterward.
Well, and like I was saying before, I mean, I certainly I can give applicants the option, do they want the 2-week or the 2-month version? The 2-month version would come with a zoning review. There's no reason. I could certainly do the zoning review after the hearing as well. So those are things we could ask the applicant what direction they'd like to go.
And so that would be a 2-for-1 where they would get the first prelim and then the actual prelim after 2 months. Okay, maybe that's a good interim solution.
David, could I suggest maybe appoint a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee to work with staff on this? We've been at it for a while now in the public hearing, and I think the position of the board is pretty well expressed.
What would this ad hoc committee do?
Just try to establish some sort of preliminary review process that's less formal.
My sense is that staff goes through this all the time, and it's been outlined for us already. And it is pre-zoning. And I think they know enough, and they've done enough of these projects, and they don't need to be overseen for something like that.
Well, you just heard Jody say it'll take some time over the next year to do this, right? She was talking about getting.
I can make this process change tomorrow. What I can't do is change the fees, but I do hear, concern about the fees. And so if an applicant chose to only do the 2-week version with no zoning analysis, I can talk to the director and see if there is a different fee already in place that could be used.
Great, that sounds good.
Okay.
Well, I thank everybody. It was really, really good discussion. And I think it's made some significant potential change here. We'll yet to see what it produces. You don't want to give Jody too much more work to do. Rather have her go on her vacation and forget about us.
Thank you.
So with that, those who are part of the ad hoc, let's do the first ad hoc.
David, I believe we have one more item.
We have
Yes, two more items.
two more items.
We have the ARB awards and the minutes.
Oh, yes, the awards. Okay, so we have the list, and I asked if we could have some phone numbers, Jody, on that. Could you get somebody to get the architect's phone numbers so that we can call? Because that's the next step. No?
So the chief planning official was going to join us in a minute here. Amy French, she's been through these ARB awards more than I have. And I think my understanding, I had sent an email to the chair and vice chair with a draft email that could go out to the different architects. And also with a sort of to-do list of, sort of next steps of, securing a room and those sorts of things. Obviously, a lot of those things that staff can help with. But this might be one where an ad hoc committee, of 2 members would be helpful to keep this item moving forward.
I think I did send the whole board the draft email.
Yep.
And yeah, I think we just need to find email contacts to send them out.
Yeah, I've got mine sort of drafted and ready to go. My one question I had is it said in the email that you can feel free to CC Osma and Jody, but we never actually included your guys's emails. So I was going to add those in, or maybe it's better just CC you guys as we send the email out.
Yeah, I think CCS.
Okay.
That's probably the best. And I guess if we have an ad hoc committee, even though I haven't been great, I should probably be on it. I have probably the most information.
Anybody else want to be a member?
I'll do it with you. That'll be fun.
Yay. Thanks, Kendra.
CC would be to Amy French, I think, at this point too, right?
Are we CCing Amy as well, or just you and I?
I'm happy to be CC'd on anything.
Okay. Yeah, this is just to the winners, just letting them know that they won.
Correct. And I can go back through our system to make sure if I have architect emails and send those out. So I can do that later today.
Great. Okay.
Do we have a timeline on this? Obviously right away, but
Maybe the ad hoc committee will meet. I think we still have September slated for the month.
Oh,
So we still need to work with whoever's in charge of the lobby and City Hall. So I think we're still looking at September. We're looking at mid-August for when the applicants, I think it's in the email, for when their board is due and their little write-up, their blurb.
and
So
there
yes,
has to
there is a
be
timeline.
some coordination with the city about putting it onto the big board in the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know, Amy, if you're able to, I had started, but if you're able to ask about the lobby and things like that.
Sure, yeah, we can, in the past, we've used those big bank of TVs or whatever. Maybe it's one total, but I think it's composed of several screens. So we can get working on that. And as long as we have the images that have been selected to be placed on those screens, I'll coordinate that.
Okay, and then there's also the, we were talking about an installation in the lobby that have physical boards that are mounted.
Yeah, that would be for the reception, that for the evening where this would be an item on the council agenda, usually some kind of proclamation the night of, and there would be attendance by the board as well, if you're able. So I guess, have we started talking dates, council dates, or no?
I think last time we talked about this, we actually talked about having it not on a council day and having it as its own, like its own awards night,
Okay.
like on a Thursday night. And we would invite the architects and sponsors, developers, and it would be kind of like not about a red carpet deal, but like something that would actually be entertaining and fun for people to attend. We need to talk about a budget. That's right.
Would you invite council as well?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. They would be invited. Yeah. But it would be kind of like, and we probably need to talk more. I don't know if it was with whoever's in charge of like what happens in the lobby in the front here, about having those boards stay all month, if that's an option. So
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, definitely the bank of TVs, they can stay for a whole month because that's how it was in the past. As far as, I mean, there's not a lot of, it hasn't been, I don't think, a ton of activity in that lobby. So they'd probably be safe staying there.
okay. Well, sounds good. I think the ad hoc committee will really help, and maybe Kendra and I can meet later this week to chart out all the meetings that we need to have to get this happening.
Okay, you're welcome to invite me because I can, as Jody's taking a bit of a break and I'm back from mine, I'm ready to jump in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Ad hoc. No, another item? Oh, yes, okay. Thank you. Glad you're here. So let's have 2 minutes to review. Meeting. The Bay Shore. Oh. So let's, is there a motion on 250-85 Bay Shore?
David, I believe we're on approval of the minutes.
Yeah, it's item 5 on the
Okay,
agenda.
item 5, sorry.
With your consent, I'll make a motion to
Yeah,
approve
yeah,
the
yeah. Go
minutes
ahead.
of May 19th.
Go ahead.
I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded.
Great, and I'll conduct the vote. Vice Chair Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Chen,
Yes.
Chair Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg,
Yes.
Board Member Thompson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
So
And then I think we need to adjourn.
that's, yes.
Before we-
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I don't think we need a motion. I think it's per your call.
I can do it?
You have the
Meeting is
power.
adjourned. Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.